things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Pressure is growing against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from all sides. The Biden administration is set to impose sanctions on a unit of the Israeli military accused of human rights violations in the occupied West Bank. Netanyahu on Sunday saying he will fight the sanctions with all his strength, while inside Israel, people increasingly want him gone.
He's a disgrace to the human and the Jewish people around the world and Israel.
Netanyahu faces corruption charges, and protesters claim staying in power and out of court is his main priority. He says the charges are politically motivated.
Protests like these are now happening every week, and they're growing, calling for new elections and for Netanyahu to step down.
Why? Multiple reasons. Israel had a massive intelligence failure on October 7th and was slow to respond to Hamas's massacre of 1,200 people. More than 130 hostages remain in Gaza. Israel and Iran were in an unprecedented shooting war last week that nearly spun out of control. And Israel's reputation is taking a beating as protesters around the world are accusing the nation founded after the Holocaust of genocide against Palestinians, an accusation the Israeli government vehemently rejects. And now Israeli strikes are intensifying in Gaza again, in and around Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians are sheltering. Israel says Hamas is hiding among the civilians. Officials say dozens of Palestinians were killed, including the Judah family. But in a medical miracle, doctors rescued the baby, who survived.
Also this morning, the head of Israel's military intelligence tendered his resignation, acknowledging a failure to foresee and stop Hamas's October 7th attack.
I mean, everything that we were told about Mossad and Shin Bet, that they were the best in the business, that their intelligence was like, bulletproof and all, it turned out to be, a ruse. It turned out to be not true. It turned out to be, just window dressing. And he got caught with his pants down is basically what happened to Netanyahu. And people want him gone for various reasons. Some people believe that the only reason why he's staying in power after he failed to keep the country safe is because he's been charged with bribery and fraud, and that being the prime minister shields him from having to go to court, him and his wife. And they think that he is politically serving himself and not the nation, not the country. It is beyond dispute that the reputation of the state of Israel has been shredded worldwide. It has been shredded on campuses in the United States. It has been shredded in the media. It has been shredded by anti-Semitism. It has been shredded by anti-Semites who were waiting for something like this. So that they could criticize, so that they could say that you don't understand, Israel's a bunch of hypocritical asshats. This is the worst result that you could possibly want to see if you believe that there's a place in the world that Jews should have where they could be safe. Not everybody thinks that, but those that do, you're losing, and everybody understands that. In their heart, they know. They see what's going on. And I'm telling you right now, my fear, because I'm political, my fear is that these kids don't understand what this kind of chaos and, the protesting and the screaming, "We are Hamas," is going to look like if they actually disrupt the Democratic National Committee, the convention. Because if you, here, look, I'll show you what the protests look like in 1968, okay? Here.
The 1968 DNC came in the middle of a year of mass protests against the Vietnam War. Protests had also erupted and civil disorders in April when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Then on June 5th, Robert Kennedy was killed as he sought the Democratic Party nomination for president. Democrats had to select a nominee after President Lyndon Johnson announced he would not seek another term and amid fallout over Vietnam. His vice president, Hubert Humphrey, was ultimately nominated for president without competing in the primaries after party bosses arranged for his support from most delegates. Despite months of organizing that brought tens of thousands of people to the city during the Democratic National Convention, Chicago refused to issue permits for almost any of the demonstrators. Instead, they met protesters with an estimated 24,000 police officers, Illinois National Guardsmen, and Army troops who patrolled the streets with fixed bayonets. This is a clip from a documentary by Newsreel that captures the tension of the protests and how police escalated the situation on August 28th after someone lowered an American flag in Grant Park. The police, under apparent orders from Chicago Mayor Richard Daley, responded by tear gassing and clubbing their way through a crowd of about 10,000 people.
Rally is extraordinary. It began for us when one of our brothers quite rightly lowered an American flag to half-mast. No one since then has mentioned the rightness of his act. It followed with an unprovoked charge of the pigs into our space.
They're not going to let us out of this park in any organized way. So for the purposes of survival, you should move out. You should float out in small groups and do whatever you're going to do outside of the park around the city. Don't get trapped in some kind of large organized march which can be surrounded. I'll see you in the street.
That is a nightmare scenario for Joe Biden, okay, where these protests, for Gaza could actually be his Vietnam. This would be a nightmare. Now, think about what was at stake in 1968, okay? Because we know our history. We're not stupid, right? And so you had Bobby Kennedy was killed, and he was, he had just won the California primary. He was probably going to be the Democratic nominee for president. And then Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. I mean, even with all that loss and all that assassination and all this death, the Democrats still lost. How? How did the Democrats lose that election? Well, for starters, Hubert Humphrey never ran in the primary, right? Because, Bobby Kennedy was going to be the nominee. The convention was charged with picking the nominee. It was a real convention. And the vice president, Hubert Humphrey, was going to be the nominee. That was the first problem. The second problem was the protesters, okay? The protesters were massive. The protests were massive, and they disrupted the convention. And if that happens this summer, if the protesters clash with the police, if chaos ensues at the Democratic National Convention, the Republicans are going to say Joe Biden can't control anything. He can't control his own convention. He can't control the protesters. The police are, everywhere, and they want to defund the police. All of this is going to be said. All of it. And no matter how much progress we've made, guess what? Don't have time to listen to the live show? Want to hear more on your schedule? Go to RandiRhodes.com and buy a stinking podcast.